I raised Donald for 45 years, until the day he decided I was no longer worth keeping around. My name is Donna Wilson, and I'm 70 years old. For most of my life, I believed that if you loved your family unconditionally, that love would eventually come back to you. I was wrong. It started when Donald was just 2 years old. His father, my husband Robert, walked out on us one Tuesday morning. No explanation, no goodbye kiss, just an empty closet and a note on the kitchen table that said, "I can't do this anymore." I found myself alone with a toddler, no college degree, and exactly $47 in my checking account. But I didn't break. I couldn't afford to break. I took 3 jobs just to keep us afloat. Monday through Wednesday, I cleaned offices downtown from 5 a.m. to noon. Wednesday through Friday, I worked the afternoon shift at Murphy's Diner, serving coffee and apple pie to truckers and local businessmen. Weekends, I babysat for neighbors, watching their kids while they went out on dates or enjoyed quiet dinners. Donald came with me everywhere. He'd sit quietly in the corner of whatever office I was cleaning, coloring in books I'd bought with tip money, or he'd help me stack napkins at the diner. "Mama," he'd ask me sometimes, "why don't we have a daddy like other kids?" "We don't need a daddy," I'd tell him, smoothing his hair. "We have each other, and that's enough." When Donald turned 8, I sold our little house, the one Robert and I had bought when we were young and hopeful. I used every penny from that sale to move us into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment across town, closer to better schools. I wanted Donald to have opportunities I never had. I wanted him to be somebody. The sacrifice was worth it when Donald graduated high school with a full scholarship to State University. I was so proud I cried right there in the auditorium. But the scholarship only covered tuition, not room and board, not books, not the 100 little expenses that come with college life. So I sold my car. Then I sold my mother's engagement ring, the only valuable thing I owned. When that wasn't enough, I took out loans against my credit cards, working extra shifts until my hands were raw and my feet were swollen every night. I lived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches for 2 years, sending Donald care packages filled with homemade cookies and $20 bills I couldn't afford to spare. He graduated with honors, business degree, just like he'd always wanted. "I'm going to take care of you now, Mom," he promised at his graduation party. "I'm going to make all your sacrifices worth it." I believed him. When you love someone the way I loved Donald, you believe every word they say. Donald got married to Sarah 3 years later. I wasn't involved in planning the wedding. Sarah's mother handled all that. But I didn't mind. I was just happy my son had found love. When their first child was born, little Emma, I became the devoted grandmother. Free babysitting whenever they needed it, which was often. I'd drive across town 3 times a week to watch Emma while Donald and Sarah went to dinner or movies or weekend trips. When Donald and Sarah decided to buy their first house, they were short on the down payment, $20,000 short to be exact. "Mom," Donald said, sitting at my kitchen table with spreadsheets and mortgage papers scattered everywhere, "I know it's a lot to ask, but could you maybe help us out? Just a loan. We'll pay you back as soon as we're settled." I gave him the money. It was my entire retirement savings, the money I'd been putting away dollar by dollar for 15 years. But seeing the joy on his face when they got the keys to their dream house, a beautiful colonial with a big backyard for Emma, made it feel worth it. The loan payments never came. When I'd bring it up gently, Donald would get this look on his face like I was being greedy and unreasonable. "Mom, you know we're struggling with the mortgage and Emma's daycare costs. Can't you just be patient?" So I was patient. I was always patient with Donald. When Donald got laid off during the recession, I was the one who helped them keep the house. I paid their mortgage for 4 months, using my Social Security checks and the small pension from my years at the diner. When Emma started school and needed supplies, I was there with backpacks and pencil boxes and new shoes. When Donald got sick with pneumonia and couldn't work for 6 weeks, I brought groceries to their house every Tuesday, making sure my son's family never went hungry. For 45 years, I gave everything I had. My youth, my health, my savings, my dreams. All of it went to making sure Donald had a better life than I did. I thought that's what mothers were supposed to do. I thought love was supposed to be unconditional. I never asked for anything in return. Not really. Maybe a phone call now and then. Maybe a visit on my birthday. Maybe just the feeling that I mattered to the person I'd spent my whole life loving. But as the years went by, those calls became shorter. The visits became rarer. Donald was busy with his career, his family, his life. I understood that, I really did. Young people are supposed to build their own lives. That's how the world works. I just wish someone had warned me how lonely it would feel to watch from the sidelines. By the time I turned 70, I was living alone in a small one-bedroom apartment, the same one I'd moved to after selling my house all those years ago. The rent was cheap, which was good because my fixed income wasn't much. I'd learned to live on very little, a skill I'd mastered during Donald's childhood and never really unlearned. My daily routine was simple. I'd wake up at 6, make coffee, and sit by my window watching the neighborhood wake up. I'd call Donald every few days, usually getting his voicemail. When he did answer, the conversations were brief. "Hi, honey, just checking in. How's Sarah? How's Emma?" "Everything's fine, Mom. Look, I'm actually in a meeting right now. Can I call you back?" He never called back. But I kept hoping. I kept believing that blood was thicker than water, that family meant something deeper than convenience. I kept believing that all those years of sacrifice had built something real between us, something that couldn't be broken by time or distance, or the simple fact that I was getting older and less useful. I was still believing it the day Donald showed up at my apartment with Sarah and a manila folder full of papers. It was a Thursday afternoon in September. I'd just finished my grocery shopping, a careful expedition where I compared prices and used coupons to stretch my budget. I was putting away a can of soup when I heard the knock on my door. "Donald!" I smiled, genuinely surprised and delighted to see him. Unannounced visits were rare. "And Sarah, come in, let me make some coffee." But Donald didn't hug me like he usually did. He didn't ask how I was feeling or comment on how I'd redecorated the living room. Instead, he sat down heavily on my couch, that manila folder clutched in his hands, and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. It was the look you give someone when you're about to deliver bad news, the look doctors have when they're about to tell you the test results weren't good, the look employers have when they're about to let you go. "Mom," he said, "we need to talk." Sarah sat beside him, her hands folded in her lap, not meeting my eyes. That should have been my first warning. Sarah was always polite to me, always made pleasant conversation. Her silence felt ominous. "Of course, honey. What's on your mind?" I settled into my armchair, the one I'd bought secondhand 20 years ago, still trying to maintain the cheerful tone of a woman who hadn't yet realized her world was about to change. Donald opened the folder and pulled out a glossy brochure. The cover showed a beautiful building surrounded by manicured gardens, with smiling elderly people sitting on benches in the sunshine. Sunny Meadows Senior Living Community was written in elegant script across the top. "We've been doing some research," Donald said, not looking at me, "and we found this amazing place. It's got everything. Activities, meal service, medical care on site. There are people your age there, Mom. You'd have friends. You'd have community." I stared at the brochure, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. "It looks lovely, honey, but I don't understand why you're showing me this. A mom." Donald finally looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my breath catch. It was determination mixed with guilt, the same expression he'd had as a child when he'd broken something and was trying to figure out how to explain it. "Sarah and I have been talking, and we think it would be best if you moved into Sunny Meadows." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually felt my body recoil, pressing back into my chair as if I could somehow escape what I'd just heard. "Best for who?" The question came out sharper than I'd intended. "For everyone," Sarah spoke for the first time, her voice artificially bright. "Donna, you're living all alone here. What if something happened to you? What if you fell or had a medical emergency? We worry about you constantly. I looked around my small apartment, my home for over 40 years, the place where I'd raised Donald after his father left. The walls were covered with pictures of him, school photos, graduation pictures, wedding photos, pictures of Emma as a baby. Every corner held memories of the life I'd built from nothing. "I'm fine here," I said quietly. "I've been fine here for 40 years. But Mom, you're 70 now." Donald leaned forward, speaking in the patient tone you use with children. "Things change. Your needs are different. At Sunny Meadows, you'd have help with everything. Cooking, cleaning, transportation. You wouldn't have to worry about maintaining this place anymore." "I don't want help with those things," I said, my voice getting smaller. "This is my home, Donald. These are my things, my memories." "We know it's a big change," Sarah said, reaching over to pat my hand in a gesture that felt more condescending than comforting. "But change can be good. You'll make new friends. You'll have activities and entertainment. It'll be like joining a club." I pulled my hand away from hers. "A club I can never leave." "Don't be dramatic, Mom." Donald's voice carried a hint of irritation now. "People visit their families all the time. You'll see us regularly." "When?" The question came out before I could stop it. "When do you visit me now, Donald? When do you call? When do you make time for your mother in your busy, important life?" Donald's face flushed red. "That's not fair. You know how busy we are with work and Emma in the house. We're doing our best." "Your best." I repeated the words slowly, tasting their bitterness. "Your best is putting me in a nursing home because it's inconvenient to worry about me." "It's not a nursing home," Sarah said quickly. "It's assisted living. There's a difference." "Is there?" I looked at both of them, these two people who were supposed to love me, who were supposed to care about my happiness. "Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you want to put me somewhere else so you don't have to think about me anymore." Donald stood up abruptly, pacing to my window and staring out at the street. "Mom, you're making this harder than it needs to be. We're trying to do what's best for you." "What's best for me," I said slowly, "is staying in my own home, with my own things, living my own life. What's best for me is having a son who actually wants to spend time with me instead of shipping me off to strangers." "The staff at Sunny Meadows are trained professionals," Sarah said. "They know how to take care of elderly people better than we do." Elderly people. The phrase hung in the air between us like a slap. Is that what I was to them now? Not Donald's mother, not Emma's grandmother, not a woman with 7 decades of experience and wisdom, just an elderly person who needed to be managed by professionals. Donald turned back from the window, and I could see he'd made up his mind. "Mom, I've already put down a deposit. Your room will be ready next week." The room went completely silent. I could hear the clock ticking on my kitchen wall, the same clock I'd bought when Donald was in high school. 45 years of loving this boy, of sacrificing everything for him, and he'd made this decision without even asking me. "You put down a deposit," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper, "without asking me." "We knew you'd react like this," Donald said, his tone defensive. "We knew you'd be resistant to change. That's why we handled the arrangements ourselves." Handled the arrangements. I felt something breaking inside my chest, something that had been cracked for years, finally splitting completely apart. "Like I'm a problem to be solved instead of your mother." "You are my mother," Donald said, finally sitting back down, "and that's exactly why I'm doing this, because I love you and I want you to be safe and happy." "Safe and happy," I echoed. "In a place I don't want to go, with people I don't know, because my own son can't be bothered to check on me himself." "Oh, Mom." "No." I held up my hand, stopping him. "Let me ask you something, Donald. When you were 2 years old and your father left us, did I put you in an institution because taking care of you was inconvenient?" Donald's face went pale. "That's completely different." "Is it?" When you needed money for college, for your house, for your family, did I tell you it was too much trouble? Did I find professionals to handle you because I couldn't be bothered? Mom, please don't. When you were sick, when you were struggling, when you needed someone to babysit Emma so you could have date nights, did I ever once say that your problems were too much for me to handle? Tears were starting to burn behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of these two people who had already decided my fate without consulting me. You're being unfair, Sarah said quietly. This is completely different. You're talking about a child versus an adult. You're right, I said, standing up slowly. Donald is an adult who should be capable of loving his mother without finding it such a burden. Donald buried his face in his hands. It's not about burden, Mom. It's about being realistic. We both work full-time. Emma has school and activities. We can't give you the attention you deserve. I never asked for attention, I said, my voice breaking despite my efforts to stay strong. I just asked to keep living my own life in my own home, like the independent woman I've always been. But what if something happens? Donald looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. What if you fall? What if you have a stroke? What if I die alone in this apartment? I finished for him. Is that what you're really afraid of, Donald? That you'll feel guilty if something happens to me while I'm living the life I choose? The silence that followed was answer enough. The move is scheduled for next Tuesday, Donald said finally, pulling more papers from his folder. We've arranged for a moving company to pack your essentials. The apartment lease runs through the end of the month, so we'll have time to sort through everything else. I looked at the papers he was laying out on my coffee table. Admission forms, financial agreements, medical releases, all of them already filled out, all of them requiring only my signature to make this nightmare official. You've thought of everything, I said quietly. We tried to, Sarah said, and for the first time she sounded genuinely apologetic. We really did try to choose a good place. The reviews are excellent. The activities coordinator used to be a teacher. They have a library and a garden, and they're not my home, I interrupted. Donald gathered up the papers and held them out to me along with a pen. Mom, I need you to sign these. I stared at the papers in his hands. In his 45 years of unconditional love, and it had come to this, my son, the baby I'd rocked to sleep every night, the child I'd worked 3 jobs to support, the man I'd given my life savings to help, was asking me to sign away my independence. I took the papers and the pen, not because I agreed with this decision, but because I finally understood something I should have seen years ago. My son was never going to be the man I'd hoped he would become. All my sacrifice, all my love, all my faith in the power of family, none of it had created the grateful, caring son I dreamed of raising. I signed every paper in complete silence. Thank you, Mom, Donald said when I handed them back. I know this is hard, but you're going to love it at Sunny Meadows, and we'll visit all the time. I didn't answer. I couldn't answer. There was nothing left to say. After they left, I sat in my armchair for hours, watching the sun set over the neighborhood where I'd lived for 4 decades. Tomorrow, I would start packing. Next Tuesday, I would leave this place forever. I would go to Sunny Meadows Senior Living Community, where trained professionals would take care of the elderly person I had apparently become. I thought about calling someone. But who? The few friends I'd had were either dead or had moved away to be closer to their own children. The neighbors were polite but distant. Donald had been my whole world for so long that I'd forgotten how to build relationships with anyone else. So I sat in the growing darkness, alone with the realization that the child I devoted my life to had just thrown that life away, like it was nothing more than an inconvenience. But I didn't cry. Not yet. There would be time for tears later. First Tuesday of October came faster than I wanted it to. The moving company Donald had hired arrived at 8 a.m. sharp. 2 men in their 20s who treated my belongings like inventory to be processed. They had a list of approved items I was allowed to bring to Sunny Meadows: 1 suitcase of clothes, a few personal photographs, maybe a small lamp or decorative item. Everything else, the furniture I'd saved years to buy, the dishes I'd eaten from for decades, the books I'd collected and reread countless times, would be donated or discarded. Donald had assured me this was for the best, since my new room would be furnished and I wouldn't need most of my things anyway. I watched them wrap my mother's china in newspaper, the same china I'd eaten holiday dinners from with Donald when he was young. The movers loaded it into a truck, bound for Goodwill without ceremony. 40 years of making this apartment a home, and it was all being erased in one morning. "You ready, ma'am?" one of the movers asked, looking at me standing in my empty living room with my single suitcase. No, I thought. I'll never be ready for this. "Yes," I said out loud. "I'm ready." Sunny Meadows Senior Living Community looked exactly like the brochure. Manicured lawns, flower gardens, and a stately brick building that could have been a nice hotel if you didn't know better. Donald and Sarah met me in the parking lot, both of them wearing bright, artificial smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Doesn't it look wonderful, Mom?" Sarah chirped as we walked toward the entrance. "Look at those beautiful gardens. You'll be able to sit outside whenever you want." I didn't respond. I was trying to memorize the feeling of being able to come and go as I pleased, since I had a feeling it would be the last time. The lobby was designed to be welcoming, soft lighting, comfortable furniture, and the kind of soothing background music you hear in elevators. But underneath the pleasant atmosphere, there was an unmistakable institutional feeling, the kind of place where schedules are set by other people and choices are limited to what's on the approved list. "Mrs. Wilson." A woman in her 50s approached us with an enthusiasm that felt practiced. "I'm Jennifer, the activities coordinator. We're so excited to welcome you to our Sunny Meadows family." Family. The word felt like a joke after what had just happened in my apartment. Jennifer gave us a tour of the facilities: the dining room where meals were served at set times, the activity room where residents could participate in scheduled crafts and games, the library with its collection of large print books and outdated magazines. Everything was clean and pleasant and utterly impersonal. "And here's your room." Jennifer opened the door to what would be my new world. It was nice enough, I supposed. Clean, functional, about the size of my old bedroom, with a single bed, a small dresser, a chair by the window, and a tiny bathroom. The walls were painted an inoffensive beige, and there was a single framed print of a generic landscape hanging above the bed. "You can personalize it however you like," Jennifer said, gesturing around the space. "Within reason, of course. We have guidelines about what's allowed." Of course they did. "The dining room serves dinner at 5:30, Jennifer continued, consulting a clipboard. "Breakfast is from 7 to 9, lunch from 11:30 to 1. There's bingo tonight at 7 in the activity room, and tomorrow we're doing watercolor painting. Mrs. Chen in room 142 is quite the artist. I think you two will get along wonderfully." Donald and Sarah stood in the doorway looking relieved, like they'd successfully completed a difficult task. "This is perfect, Mom," Donald said. "Look how nice everything is." "It's very nice," I agreed quietly. We went through the admission paperwork with Jennifer, discussing my medical history, dietary preferences, and emergency contacts. Donald would be my primary contact, though given his track record, I wasn't sure how much contact there would actually be. "Visiting hours are flexible," Jennifer explained. "Family can come any time between 9 a.m. and 8 p.m. We just ask that you check in at the front desk." "We'll be here all the time," Sarah promised, though she was already checking her phone. "Maybe Sunday dinners or Saturday afternoons." Maybe. The word hung in the air like everything else they'd promised over the years. After they left, I sat on my new bed in my new room and tried to understand how my life had changed so completely in the span of a week. 7 days ago, I had been an independent woman living in her own home. Now I was a resident of Sunny Meadows, subject to meal schedules and visiting hours and activity coordinators who spoke to me like I was a child. The sun was setting outside my window, and I could hear the sounds of dinner preparation coming from the dining room down the hall. Soon, someone would probably come to escort me to my assigned table with my assigned dining companions to eat my assigned meal. For 45 years, I had given everything to my son: my youth, my money, my dreams, my independence. And this was where it had led me. To a sterile room in a place I'd never chosen, surrounded by strangers who were paid to care about my well-being. I thought about Donald driving home to his beautiful house, probably feeling relieved that the mom problem had been solved. I thought about Sarah making dinner in her spacious kitchen, no longer having to worry about including me in their plans. I thought about Emma, growing up with a grandmother who had been conveniently relocated to a place where she wouldn't be inconvenient anymore. But I didn't cry. Not yet. Tomorrow, I would meet Mrs. Chen and learn about watercolor painting. I would eat breakfast between 7 and 9 and dinner at 5:30 sharp. I would participate in scheduled activities with people who were probably very nice, but were not my family. And maybe, eventually, I would figure out how to live in this new world my son had chosen for me. But tonight, I sat in the growing darkness of my small room and tried to remember what it felt like to be Donna Wilson, independent woman, instead of just another elderly resident of Sunny Meadows Senior Living Community. The first month at Sunny Meadows passed like a gray fog. I followed the schedules, attended the activities, and smiled politely when Jennifer introduced me to other residents. But inside, I felt like I was disappearing piece by piece, becoming exactly what Donald had decided I was, just another elderly person who needed to be managed by professionals. My roommate was Margaret Chen, a 78-year-old former teacher whose son lived in California. She was kind enough, but our conversations always seemed to circle back to the same painful truth. We were both here because our children had found us inconvenient. My David calls every Christmas, Margaret told me during one of our quiet evenings. If he remembers, last year he called on December 28th and said he'd been swamped with work. I nodded, understanding completely. Donald promised to visit all the time. That was 6 weeks ago. We fell into a comfortable routine of shared disappointment. Two women who had given everything to raise sons, who had repaid that devotion by warehousing us with strangers. But everything changed the night I met Patricia Taylor. It was a Tuesday in late November, around 10 p.m. I couldn't sleep. The unfamiliar sounds and smells of the facility kept me awake most nights, so I'd gotten up to sit by the window and look out at the parking lot. The night shift was always quieter, with fewer staff members and a different energy altogether. That's when I heard the soft knock on my door. "Mrs. Wilson, are you all right? I saw your light on." I turned to see a woman in her mid-30s wearing scrubs, with kind eyes and an expression of genuine concern. She wasn't one of the day shift nurses I'd become accustomed to, those efficient, pleasant women who checked off tasks and moved on to the next room. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "Just can't sleep." "Mind if I come in for a minute? I'm Patricia, one of the night nurses." Something about her tone made me nod. She didn't have that hurried quality most of the staff had. She actually seemed like she had time to care about my answer. Patricia sat down in the chair across from me, and I noticed she looked tired in a way that went deeper than just working a late shift. There were worry lines around her eyes, and her scrubs looked like they'd seen better days. "New places are always hard to get used to," she said gently. "How long have you been here?" 6 weeks, I said. "My son thinks it's wonderful for me." Patricia caught the bitter tone in my voice. "But you don't think it's wonderful." It was such a simple observation, but somehow it opened something inside me that had been locked tight since the day Donald signed those papers. "I've been taking care of myself for 70 years, I said quietly. "I raised my son alone after his father left. I worked 3 jobs to put him through college. I gave him everything I had, and when I needed him most, he decided I was too much trouble." Patricia listened without interrupting, without offering the kind of empty reassurances I'd gotten used to from the day staff. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Wilson," she said finally, "can I tell you something? I've worked in facilities like this for 8 years, and I've learned that there are 2 kinds of people here. There are the ones who gave up on life before they ever walked through those doors, and then there are the ones who still have fight left in them. You've got fight left in you." "I don't feel like fighting anymore," I admitted. "That's because you think you lost," Patricia said. "But what if you didn't? What if this is just a different kind of beginning?" I looked at her more closely. "What do you mean?" Patricia hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Can I share something personal with you? I'm a single mom. My daughter Chloe is 16, and her dad walked out when she was 2, just like what happened to you and your son. I work nights here and pick up shifts at the county hospital on weekends, trying to save money for Chloe's college. Some days I feel like I'm drowning, trying to give her everything she needs." "That must be incredibly difficult," I said, and I meant it. "It is, but you know what keeps me going? Women like you. Women who did what I'm doing now, who sacrificed everything for their kids and made it work. When I see you sitting here, defeated by a son who should be grateful for everything you gave him, it breaks my heart. Because you're not just Mrs. Wilson, room 237. You're a woman who built a life from nothing. You're a mother who never gave up. You're a survivor." Tears started burning behind my eyes. When was the last time someone had seen me that way? When was the last time someone had acknowledged what I'd accomplished instead of just what I needed help with? "I don't know how to be that person anymore," I whispered. "Yes, you do," Patricia said firmly. "You just forgot for a while." Over the next few weeks, Patricia started stopping by my room during her shifts, not for official nurse duties, but just to talk. I learned that she'd grown up in foster care, that she'd put herself through nursing school while pregnant with Chloe, that she was saving every penny she could for her daughter's future. "Chloe wants to study engineering," Patricia told me one night. "She's brilliant with math and science, but the good programs are expensive. I've been looking at state schools, trying to figure out how to make the numbers work." "What about scholarships?" I asked. "She'll probably get some academic money, but not enough. I've been putting away what I can, but nursing doesn't exactly make you rich, you know." I found myself looking forward to these conversations more than anything else in my day. Patricia treated me like a real person with valuable insights, not just an elderly resident who needed to be managed. She asked my advice about parenting, about managing money, about making difficult decisions. For the first time in years, I felt useful. "Mrs. Wilson," Patricia said one night in early December, "can I ask you something personal? Do you have any regrets about the choices you made with your son?" I thought about it for a long time. "I regret that I taught him to take love for granted," I said finally. "I regret that I never asked for anything in return, so he never learned how to give. I regret that I made my whole world about him, so when he decided I didn't fit in his world anymore, I had nothing left." "But you do have something left," Patricia said. "You have yourself. You have your strength, your wisdom, your capacity to love. Donald didn't take that away from you. He just convinced you it didn't matter. It feels like it doesn't matter." "It matters to me," Patricia said simply, "and it matters to Chloe. She's been asking about you, actually. I told her about this amazing woman I work with who raised her son all by herself and put him through college. Chloe said she hopes she can be that strong if she ever has kids." Something shifted inside my chest when she said that. For months, I'd felt invisible, like my story didn't matter to anyone anymore. But here was a young woman who saw value in what I'd done, and a teenager who looked up to the choices I'd made. "I'd like to meet Chloe sometime," I said. "She'd love that. Maybe she could visit you here." Or, I said, surprising myself with the thought, "Maybe I could take you both out to dinner sometime, if residents are allowed to leave for social visits." Patricia smiled. They are. Family can sign you out anytime. Well, I said, I guess we'll have to figure out what counts as family. The next morning, I made my first independent decision since arriving at Sunny Meadows. I asked Jennifer to help me contact a lawyer. Is everything all right, Mrs. Wilson? Jennifer asked, looking concerned. Everything's fine, I said. I just need to review some legal documents. What I didn't tell her was that I'd been thinking about Patricia and Chloe all night, about the sacrifices Patricia was making, the same sacrifices I'd made 30 years earlier, about how Chloe reminded me of Donald at that age, bright and ambitious and deserving of every opportunity, about how they'd become more like family to me in 2 months than Donald had been in 2 years. The lawyer, Mr. Harrison, came to Sunny Meadows the following week. He was a patient man in his 60s who didn't seem at all surprised by my request. Estate planning revisions are quite common, Mrs. Wilson, he said, spreading papers across the table in the facility's conference room. Can you tell me what changes you'd like to make? I want to remove my son Donald as my beneficiary, I said clearly, and I want to explore the possibility of adult adoption. Mr. Harrison raised his eyebrows slightly. Adult adoption? That's less common, but certainly legal. May I ask who you're considering adopting? I told him about Patricia, about her dedication as a single mother, about her kindness to me, about how she'd helped me remember who I was beyond Donald's definition of me. Blood doesn't make family, I said, echoing something Patricia had said to me. Love does, and Patricia has shown me more genuine love and respect in 2 months than my biological son has in the past 5 years. Mr. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. Adult adoption does create a legal parent-child relationship, including inheritance rights. The process involves paperwork, background checks, and court approval, but it's definitely possible. However, I have to ask, have you discussed this with Patricia? It's a significant legal commitment. Not yet, I admitted. I wanted to understand the process first. And your current will? What assets are involved? I told him about my savings account, the one Donald didn't know about. After he'd taken over managing my official finances, I'd quietly maintained a separate account with money from my late husband's insurance policy and some investments I'd made over the years. It wasn't a fortune, but it was substantial, about $150,000 plus my life insurance policy worth $75,000. Those assets would transfer to your adopted daughter upon your death, Mr. Harrison explained. But you should also know that you can establish educational trusts, make gifts during your lifetime, and structure things however you prefer. I want Patricia to be able to send Chloe to college, I said, and I want them to know that someone believes in them the way I wished someone had believed in me. The conversation with Patricia happened a few nights later during one of her regular visits to my room. I'd been nervous about bringing it up, unsure how she'd react to such an unusual proposal. Patricia, I said after we talked about Chloe's latest school project, I need to ask you something important, and I want you to know that it's okay to say no. She looked concerned. Of course, Mrs. Wilson. What is it? I've been thinking about family, I said carefully, about what it really means and who really shows up for the people they care about. And I've realized that you've been more of a daughter to me these past few months than Donald has been a son in years. Patricia was quiet, listening. I've contacted a lawyer about adult adoption, I continued. I'd like to legally make you my daughter, if you're willing. It would mean inheritance rights, but more than that, it would mean having a real family connection with someone who actually cares about my well-being. Patricia stared at me for a long moment, her eyes filling with tears. Mrs. Wilson, Donna, I don't know what to say. Say what you're really thinking, I encouraged her. Don't worry about hurting my feelings. I'm thinking, Patricia said slowly, that I've never had a mother figure who believed in me the way you do. I'm thinking that Chloe has been asking when she can meet Grandma Donna. That's what she calls you. I'm thinking that when I imagine family, I picture people who choose to love each other, not just people who happen to share DNA. Is that a yes? I asked, hardly daring to hope. "That's the biggest yes I've ever given to anything," Patricia said, reaching over to hug me. "But are you sure? This is a huge decision, and I don't want you to feel like you're replacing Donald." "I'm not replacing Donald," I said firmly. "I'm choosing to build a family with someone who values what I have to offer. Donald made his choice when he signed those papers and dropped me off here. Now I'm making mine." The legal process took 3 months. During that time, Patricia and I grew closer, and I finally met Chloe. She was everything Patricia had described: brilliant, ambitious, and remarkably mature for her age. She called me Grandma Donna from the first day and treated our relationship like the most natural thing in the world. "Mom told me you put your son through college all by yourself," Chloe said during one of their visits. "That's incredible. I hope I can be that strong someday." "You're already that strong," I told her. "Look at how you're working toward your dreams even though things aren't easy. That takes real character." Having Patricia and Chloe in my life transformed my time at Sunny Meadows. I was no longer just a resident waiting for rare visits from an obligated son. I was a grandmother helping with homework, a mother offering advice about difficult decisions, a woman whose experience and wisdom mattered to people who chose to love her. In March, the adoption was finalized. Patricia and Chloe were both there in the courthouse when the judge made it official. At 70 years old, I had a new daughter and a granddaughter who actually wanted me in their lives. "How does it feel to be legally part of our family?" Patricia asked afterward. "Like coming home," I said. But the best part was still to come. That same week, I revised my will. Everything I owned, the savings Donald didn't know about, the life insurance policy, even my small personal belongings, would go to Patricia. But more importantly, I established a college trust for Chloe that would cover her tuition at any engineering program she chose. "Mrs. Wilson," Mr. Harrison said as I signed the final documents, "this is a very generous gift." "It's not a gift," I corrected him. "It's an investment in family." I also made another decision that felt like reclaiming my power. I told Jennifer that I wanted to move out of Sunny Meadows. "Move out?" Jennifer looked shocked. "But Mrs. Wilson, your son specifically arranged for you to live here permanently." "My son made that decision without consulting me," I said calmly. "But I'm still legally competent to make my own choices about where I live." The truth was, I could afford a nice apartment with the money I'd been saving, and Patricia had offered to help me find something close to her and Chloe's place. For the first time in almost a year, I could imagine having my own space again, my own routine, my own life. "I'll be moving in with my daughter while I look for an apartment," I told Jennifer, enjoying the way her eyebrows shot up when I said, "daughter." Donald found out about the adoption in June when he called Mr. Harrison's office trying to inquire about my financial affairs. Apparently, he'd been planning to discuss Mom's assets and had discovered that he was no longer listed as my emergency contact or beneficiary. He showed up at Sunny Meadows that same afternoon, furious and demanding to speak with me immediately. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wilson," the receptionist told him, "but Mrs. Wilson moved out 3 weeks ago." "Moved out?" Donald's voice carried down the hallway. "What do you mean she moved out? I put her here. She can't just leave." "Actually, sir, residents are free to leave at any time if they're competent to make that decision. Donald demanded my new address and phone number. When they refused to give it to him without my permission, he threatened to call the police, to sue the facility, to report them to the state. But there was nothing he could do. I was a 70-year-old woman who had made a legal decision about where to live, and no one, not even the son who had put me there, could force me to stay. He tracked me down through Mr. Harrison's office eventually. I was living in a beautiful one-bedroom apartment just 10 minutes from Patricia and Chloe's house, and I'd never been happier. The knock on my door came on a Saturday afternoon in July. I was expecting Patricia and Chloe for dinner. Patricia was teaching me to use a smartphone so I could video chat with Chloe when she left for college, when I heard the angry pounding. I looked through the peephole and saw Donald standing there, red-faced and clearly agitated. Sarah was with him, looking uncomfortable and avoiding eye contact with the door. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Hello, Donald." "Mom." He pushed past me into my living room, looking around at my new apartment with obvious shock. "What the hell is going on? I just found out you left Sunny Meadows. And what's this about an adoption? Did you lose your mind?" "I found my mind, actually," I said calmly, closing the door. "For the first time in years, I'm thinking clearly about what I want and need. You can't just adopt some random nurse," Sarah said from the doorway. "Donald is your real son, your real family." "Real family," I repeated slowly. "Donald, when was the last time you visited me at Sunny Meadows?" His face flushed. "I've been busy. Work has been—" "The last time you visited me was the day you dropped me off there, 8 months ago." I sat down in my chair, gesturing for them to sit on the couch. They remained standing. In those 8 months, Patricia has spent time with me almost every day. She's introduced me to her daughter, included me in their family dinners, asked my advice, valued my opinions. Which one of us sounds like real family to you? "She's using you," Donald said desperately. "Can't you see that? She's after your money." "My money?" I almost laughed. "Donald, you don't even know how much money I have. You've never asked about my finances except when you needed me to pay for something. Patricia has never asked me for a single dollar." "But the adoption was my idea," I said firmly. "I asked her, not the other way around." Donald started pacing around my small living room. "Mom, this is insane. You can't just replace me with some stranger." "I'm not replacing you, Donald. I'm choosing to build a relationship with someone who actually wants one." "I want a relationship with you," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Do you? Because your actions suggest otherwise. You put me in a nursing home without asking my opinion. You never visited. You never called. You made it clear that I was a burden you needed to manage, not a mother you wanted to love." Sarah finally spoke up. "Donna, we understand you're upset, but this adoption thing goes too far. What about Emma? She's your real granddaughter." "When was the last time Emma visited me, or called, or even asked about me?" Sarah's silence was answer enough. "Patricia's daughter, Chloe, calls me twice a week," I continued. "She tells me about school, asks for advice, shares her dreams with me. She calls me grandma and means it. Which relationship sounds more real to you?" Donald stopped pacing and turned to face me. "Mom, I know I haven't been perfect, but I'm your son. That has to count for something." For a moment, I saw a glimpse of the little boy I'd raised, the child who used to run to me when he was hurt or scared. But that little boy had grown into a man who'd proven that biology alone wasn't enough to sustain love. "It counted for 45 years, Donald. I gave you everything I had because you were my son. But being my son isn't a lifetime pass to treat me however you want and still expect unconditional love in return. So you're just going to cut me out of your life completely?" "I'm not cutting you out," I said quietly, "but I'm not going to keep pretending that a relationship exists when it doesn't. If you want to be part of my life, you're welcome to try. But it has to be because you actually want to, not because you think you're entitled to it." Donald looked at me for a long moment, and I could see him struggling with emotions he probably hadn't felt since childhood. Finally, he shook his head. "I don't understand how you can throw away everything we've had for some nurse you barely know." "Donald," I said gently, "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm finally picking up the pieces of myself that I lost along the way." They left without saying goodbye. 2 hours later, Patricia and Chloe arrived for dinner as planned. I told them about Donald's visit while we cooked together in my small kitchen. "Are you okay?" Patricia asked, studying my face. "That must have been difficult." "It was," I admitted, "but also necessary. For the first time, I told Donald exactly how his actions made me feel. I didn't apologize for having needs or wants. I didn't minimize my own worth to make him feel better." "Good for you," Chloe said fiercely. You deserve so much better than how he treated you." As we sat around my small dining table, sharing a meal I'd prepared in my own home with my chosen family, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete contentment. Not the desperate hope that Donald would change, not the constant anxiety about whether I was asking for too much, just peace. "Patricia," I said over dessert, "I need to tell you something. The college fund for Chloe, it's enough for her to go anywhere she wants. Any school, any program. She doesn't have to limit her dreams because of money." Chloe's eyes went wide. "Grandma Donna, that's too much. I can't accept—" "Yes, you can," I said firmly. "This is what grandmothers are supposed to do. We're supposed to invest in our grandchildren's futures. I couldn't do it for Emma because Donald never gave me the chance, but I can do it for you, and it makes me happy." Patricia was crying quietly. "Donna, I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me," I said. "Just keep being the daughter I always hoped I'd have." 6 months later, Chloe started her freshman year at MIT, her dream school, studying mechanical engineering. I got regular video calls showing me her dorm room, her new friends, and her excitement about her classes. Donald never called. Sarah sent a Christmas card with a generic message, but there was no personal note, no attempt to rebuild the relationship I'd offered him. I wasn't surprised, but I also wasn't heartbroken anymore. You can't lose something you never really had. On my 71st birthday, Patricia threw me a party in my apartment. The guests were my new neighbors, some of my former colleagues from the diner who'd tracked me down, and a few friends from the book club I'd joined. Chloe came home from college just for the occasion. As I looked around my living room filled with people who'd chosen to celebrate me, I thought about the woman who'd sat in that sterile room at Sunny Meadows 10 months earlier. She'd felt invisible, discarded, forgotten by the person she'd devoted her life to loving. But she'd been wrong about one thing. She hadn't been forgotten. She'd just been looking for validation in the wrong place. The love I'd poured into Donald for 45 years hadn't been wasted, even though he'd never learned how to return it. That love had shaped me into someone capable of recognizing real family when I found it. It had taught me how to sacrifice for people I cared about, how to support someone else's dreams, how to show up consistently for the people who mattered. Donald had rejected those gifts, but Patricia and Chloe had welcomed them. As my friends sang happy birthday and I blew out the candles on the cake Patricia had baked, I made a wish. Not for Donald to change, not for him to realize what he'd lost. I wished for the continued happiness of my chosen family and for the wisdom to keep choosing love over obligation, joy over resentment, hope over regret. At 71 years old, I'd learned that it's never too late to find the family you deserve. Sometimes you have to stop waiting for people to love you the way you need to be loved and start looking for people who already do. My son had dumped me in a nursing home because he thought I was no longer worth his time. In response, I'd built a beautiful life with people who saw my value every single day. In the end, the best revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was happiness.